Hello everyone, hope you all are doing great. I am Deep Mentor, welcome back to my channel. In the last tutorial we covered introduction to lists, and in this tutorial we will continue with the lists and understand different operations we can perform on a list. So let's get started. I am a foodie and I like trying different dishes. Let me create a list of different dishes I like. I now want to write a message using each element of the list. Based on what we have learned so far, I will have to write multiple statements to print the message as shown. If there are hundreds or millions of such items, then I will have to write the statement that many times. There should be a better way of doing these repetitive things for each item. Indeed, there is a better way of doing these repetitive tasks. That is by using a for loop. For loops provide an efficient way for iterating over a collection of items. As shown in the example, while defining a for loop, you define a variable which is generally named as singular form of the list name. In present case, the list name is dishes, so this variable name is dish. The for loop here basically says iterate over dishes list and read each individual element into variable called dish. The colon at the end of the statement tells Python interpreter that the indented code from next line is supposed to be executed for each element of the list. In the example, the print message will be iterated for all the elements of the dishes list. Indentation plays very important part in Python. Indentation defines a block of code for Python. As shown in the example, the line good food is good mood is not indented and thus will be treated as code outside for loop and thus will be executed as normal code. If you forget to add a colon in a for loop, you will get a syntax error. For loop syntax is incomplete without a colon. Second mistake people do at times is they forget to indent the code. The for loop expects an indented block, or in other words a block of code that need to be executed for each element in a for loop. So if there is no indented block of code, you will get an indentation error. Also keep in mind you can have as many lines of indented code as you want based on what are different operations you want to perform on each element. Like you have iterated over string list, you can also iterate over numerical values. Let me introduce you to the range function. Range function generates a sequence of numbers in a provided range. It's quite useful when you want to repeat some operation x number of times. You can provide starting number as first parameter and ending number as second parameter. Keep in mind starting number is inclusive and ending number is exclusive. So in the example, 1 is included and 11 is excluded. By default, the range generates number by adding 1 to the previous value. You can also provide a step value as third argument if you want to skip few numbers in between while generating the numbers. So in the example, it starts generating number from 2 and will generate next number by adding 2 instead of 1, thus generating even numbers till 10. Similarly, you can use range to generate odd numbers as shown. Range function itself doesn't generate a list data type. It generates an immutable sequence type. If you want to convert output of range function to a list, you can make use of list function as shown. Now let's cover some basic statistics you can perform on lists using Python function. Python comes with functions like sum, min and max, which help to get sum of all numbers in a list, find minimum number in a list and find maximum number in a list respectively. We have so far created the list using just the values of the range function. But in theory, you can make any list using the values generated by a range function. In the example, we have generated multiples of 10 using the range function generated values. Another way of creating a list is called list comprehension. It provides a concise way of creating list compared to a for loop. You define how each element of for loop will be used for generating the list item. As shown, you enclose the list comprehension within square brackets. Let's now have a look into slicing. Slicing is a way of accessing a sublist from a list, or in other words, accessing a slice of a list. Here you need to provide a start index and an end index. Start index is inclusive and end index is exclusive. This is similar to the range parameters we saw earlier. If you don't provide a start index, it will slice from start of the list. Similarly, if you don't provide the end index, it will slice till end of the list. You can also use negative index for slicing. You can also use a for loop for a slice. Like with the range function, you can also provide a step value with a slice. Step will generate the sub list using previous index plus step value as shown. For copying all the elements of one list to another list, you need to provide list name, open bracket, colon, close bracket. As you can see, this is completely new list, and if you make any amendment to new list, it won't affect the original list. Contrary to this, if you assign the list variable to new variable as shown, then the two variable will refer to the same list, and in case we make any amendment to one variable, the same will be reflected in the other variable. This is called pass by reference in programming world. A list is a mutable data type. That is, you can append, modify, or in other words, change data in a list. But many times you might require a list which is not modifiable or immutable. For example, list of month names which will remain the same always. Such immutable list is called tuple in Python. While declaring the tuple, we use parentheses instead of square brackets. You can access the elements of a tuple using square brackets as we do for the lists. Also, you can iterate over elements of a tuple using for loop. You can't change the value of a tuple or modify any element. You can assign a different tuple to a variable though. You can also perform slicing operation on a tuple. As we are now going deeper into the Python programming, let me introduce you to Python Enhancement Proposal 8 guidelines, popularly known as PEP 8. When someone wants to propose some changes related to Python, they write a PEP. Different PEP documents deal with different changes related to Python, not just styling guidelines. One such PEP is called PEP 8, which guides how the Python code should be written. One of the authors of PEP 8 is Guido van Rossum himself. One of Guido's key insights is that code is read much more often than it is written. Well, Guido is very right with this insight. So, considering the fact that a program you write is meant to be read, it's every programmer's duty to ensure the code he/she writes is clean and easy to read and understand. I have added link to the PEP 8 documentation in the description. It's little lengthy and we will keep covering recommendations mentioned in the document when and where required. For now, we will just cover few of them. First is indentation. As per PEP 8 guidelines, use 4 spaces per indentation level. It's obviously more work to write 4 spaces compared to pressing a tab for adding the indentation. Most of the IDEs support modifying the number of spaces a tab can introduce to your code. So configure your IDE to use 4 spaces with each tab press and then use tab for indentation. We'll show you how we can configure 4 spaces per tab in Visual Studio Code. Second recommendation is limit all lines to a maximum of 79 characters. It's always recommended that the whole code line should be visible in one screen. Traditionally, the screen would show 79 characters. Thus, this recommendation was made. Another recommendation related to the line length is that the comment should not be more than 72 characters. This is because some of the documenting tools add some formatting character at the beginning of the comment. Third recommendation is separate related code with a blank vertical line. For example, if you are creating a list in X number of lines and then performing some operation in next Y number of lines, then you can separate the two related code, one for creating the list and second for performing some operation on the list using a vertical blank line. Let's see how we can adjust the indentation value in Visual Studio Code. In my Visual Studio Code, you can see as soon as I moved to next line of for loop where an indentation is required, IDE itself generated an indentation of 4 spaces. You can adjust the indentation spaces in the Visual Studio Code by clicking the spaces value shown at the bottom. Because the value is set as 4 for me, whenever I press the tab key, it automatically adds 4 spaces for me. Congratulations, you now have better understanding of lists and know how to access different elements of the list more efficiently. You also now understand tuples and how it differs from the list. In the next tutorial, we will be covering if statements. Please subscribe to my channel to get notifications about future tutorials. Thank you.